What's it going to be? Loyalty to your country or loyalty to me?
Metal Gear Solid Delta, a game that's been out for a little while now. This remake of the classic 2004 Snake Eater is a mixed bag of opinions. Its arrival hasn't been short of messy in areas where it's lacking in performance and on consoles and sometimes on PC, with reports of stuttering, low frame rates and the occasional bug. It's a foresight that many naturally saw coming, while some refuse to believe it to be true given on this game's legendary history and what it deserved. When Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater in 2004 arrived, it was a game clearly way ahead of its time, or rather a series that always pushed the limits of creativity and innovative detail. MGS3 evolved the stealth action espionage genre and elevated it with new survival mechanics that were a welcome addition to MGS3. With all that being said, Delta promised something that so many were anticipating, since something resurfaced in October 2016, MGS3 Pachinko. It looked like MGS3 was coming back with better visuals, and that naturally had everyone's interest, but it was nothing more than cutscenes for a gambling machine. This came just after Kojima and Konami split in the midst of the Phantom Pain. The chances of MGS returning seemed impossible. Now that lead director Hideo Kojima was no longer connected to the MGS series in any way, had people speculating if Delta could potentially deliver. It was the end of an era in gaming as a whole during this time. Now, gaming has changed, hasn't it? The Remake Express train arrived and every developer was taking the ride on cashing in on this new wave. That still seems to be a big thing today. Konami had at some point, with the help of Blooper Team, redeveloped Silent Hill 2 into remake form. The promotional side of it was received by the critics and the audience not very well at first, given on Konami's reputation, but that was all history as Silent Hill proved to be a huge success as remakes go. The problem has never been games just remade, it's in what developers choose in terms of technology and presentation that often brings to life beloved classics.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So you are Maria.
Capcom's Resident Evil is that highlighting example of remakes usually working well. Capcom uses their own in-game engine, and that's nothing short of amazing and rarely without any issues as far as I'm aware. But as we come to understand, most developers these days rely too heavily on the Unreal 5 engine, an open source software lacking any character or uniqueness. It's not that the visuals don't often look great, because they do, it's just that nearly every modern game is using it, and always upon releasing they're always full of bugs, constant stuttering and outright shutdown of the said game. It's not necessarily the software is the issue, it's just that people are getting sick of seeing Unreal Engine 5 games rather than something entirely unique. This is becoming a pattern that really needs boycotting on every level before it becomes generally accepted like everything else that offers a terrible quality of life. Games on older generation consoles had their little bugs and what we call exploits. MGS3 was no exception, but these weren't game breaking enough to warrant complaint. In fact, they became a part of the game's quirks and made speedruns super fun. But the biggest thing these games didn't do was suffer from terrible performance issues or completely shut down mid-game. It was just uncommon for games to come out upon release on older generation consoles unplayable, a word that's often thrown around for Metal Gear Solid Delta, but that couldn't be more far from the truth. In relation to MGS Delta, it is a victim of poor decision making that Konami really should have foreseen. A game as huge like MGS3 and the level of legacy that game carries is not something you can afford to fumble, especially when it comes for the game to be even respectably playable. Upon launch, it was already a disaster in technical terms. But however, MGS Delta isn't a game we should completely dismiss. It's given us everything we've asked for, down to nearly every detail. So much so these fickle critics with no sense of intellectual judgment are the same people who say it needs to be faithful are also the ones saying it's too faithful to be remake worthy. Konami was fucked if they don't, and fucked if they do. With all love to the MGS fandom, as a fan myself, there's no doubt that there's a sect of us that are just straight up toxic. To outright criticise this game doesn't seem like the right thing to do. I'm not going to be like a typical journalist and tell you what sounds good, or be straight up toxic and tell you it's trash. Because there's a great deal of quality this game brings, even if it feels refined and plastic in areas, as modern games often do. Or it doesn't fully capture the essence of what made MGS3 so unique to begin with. This isn't a perfect remake, but it's meaningful and its experience still lives on 21 years later.
I've been waiting, Snake, for a long time. Waiting for your birth, your growth, and the finality of today.
The core gameplay this time around goes without saying. It's very tethered to MGS5's core playstyle, which makes all the sense in the world that they would use this because MGS5 arguably has the best controls and stealth mechanics we've seen in the series. There's so many things ripped out of that game instilled into Delta, quite clearly. From the way Snake walks, the normal jog function is similar, the crouch walk and the transition between standing and then prone. This new style is what essentially makes Delta a remake, because everything else, including all the extras and special modes, is ripped straight out of Subsistence, although dual mode is no longer available.
Ready?
It's these new mechanics that really prevent it from being just a remaster with better graphics. These mechanics work well enough, albeit they feel rusty and unpolished, comparing it to MGS5 The Phantom Pain, which is so much smoother in movement. Delta now feels heavier and sluggish, and less responsive. I couldn't tell if it was my controller, but I'm using wired rather than wireless, and some of the button prompts just feel slow and unresponsive. And it's even worse when you involve the CQC mechanic. It's not the action that's the problem, because the animations in the interrogation system and slitting throat are incredible, as well as the new throw animations in the desired direction.
Speak! Hornets! They're terrifying!
Although the choke animation is lacking compared to MGS5 and just doesn't look realistic. The issue lies in the responsiveness. For example, in the original game, if you were close enough to an enemy, you could grab them no problem in any direction really smoothly, as goes for the others in the series, especially MGS5, which also incorporated crouch CQC. Delta has this really frustrating CQC icon that doesn't appear at all times. The movement isn't an issue as we initially thought, in fact it works well with Delta's new mechanics. It's just getting used to the new timing compared to what felt so easily hands-on. I mean, you can still take enemies out stealthily behind a corner, but just not as fluently as MGS5. You can't just hug the wall and then press the CQC button to take them out undetected. You just simply got to rely on your quick reactions. I think the problem is with Metal Gear Delta's CQC is it relies too heavily on using the right camera stick in order to trigger the CQC prompts. But the real lack of responsiveness comes when you try to hold an enemy up, especially after taking them down with CQC or if they've just woken up. You can't just hold your gun down and it'll instantly hold them up. You have to keep tapping it in order for the input to register. This is something that was in the original that was clearly a flaw, but it wasn't as bad as the likes of Delta. But MGS5 completely perfected it. Also, when the enemy tries to hit you with a knife counter, they pull out the blade way too quickly than they did do in the original, which doesn't give you chance really to respond. It is possible to still make the counter, but they've just rushed the animation far too much that it looks a little out of place. It's understandable that Konami played it safe on the story angles and everything else, but when it comes to combat in the game, why didn't they just take everything that was great about the best game within the series in terms of controls and implement it in Delta, albeit in a way that was more polished? Konami should have been willing to take more risks like they were with Silent Hill 2 that removed the tank controls. You can tell that Delta still relies heavily on the original PS2 concepts, but it really doesn't work for it. The CQC animations look beautiful. It just fails to capitalise on the best elements of the series to make its own identity. It's clear that they use the flawed elements of the original that really just feel unnecessary. Like dragging the enemy with CQC after a while would knock the guard out. Delta should have expanded on its CQC. Lore-wise it would have made sense because Big Boss and the boss developed CQC together.
What was that? Some kind of judo?
No, it's called CQC, a basic form of close quarters combat. He and I developed it together.
Why not throw in crouching CQC, as well as disarming enemies and using their own weapons against them? The same goes as well for consecutive CQC.
Consecutive! CQC!
It's not like Big Boss doesn't know this skill, because in MGS3 he wipes out the entire Ocelot unit with that said skill. Using weapons is a commendable feature in Delta as well, albeit once again clearly ripped out from MGS5. All with different sound effects, really, apart from when using TNT, which is definitely ripped straight out of MGS5. And of course it has slightly tweaked physics to make Delta's its own. The crosshair system is included as well as first person. Enemies' AI respond well enough, they can be sharp and responsive and aggressive, and both decisive, taking cover when need be, all just like the original. Their responsiveness to attacks are intelligent in many ways. Depending on what limb you shoot will affect them in combat, and blood splatter animations and effects are far more gruesome. And the weapon access system is just the same as the original, but you use the directionals to access your inventory. For me, it just feels unresponsive, but I put that down to because of the game being poorly optimised on the Unreal Engine. Compared to the Fox engine, for example, when you play MGS5, the inventory system is very similar, because you use the D-pad to access it, but it just feels way much more smoother. But on the stealthy side of things, the Mark 22 is very different than before, this time with bullet drop. A feature at first that feels cumbersome, but adds to the intensity of carefully incapacitating an enemy. I didn't see the issue with it after a while, it kinda became second nature, and using the sight aim makes the accuracy better anyway. MGS3 is a very linear game. The game feels heavier, as a lot of remakes do, to compensate for the map. We've seen this in many remakes, including Resident Evil. It would be nice to have seen them go outside the creative norm with new areas, but people would have probably found a way to complain anyway, so playing it safe was the option Konami took. And in doing so, in my opinion and many others, kinda stifled the game. Legacy Controls offers something way out of our original expectations. I personally don't like it, because I was hoping for the exact same control scheme and game mechanics as the PS2 era, at least the subsistence version. The game plays out roughly the same as before, but just with different control schemes. It offers a crouch walk, one I assumed they tried to replicate out of the 3DS version, plus aiming is a lot different than before. Instead of holding square and running with the left stick to move and aim, the functionality personally didn't work for me. It really isn't that bothersome, but I just preferred holding square whilst running with my gun.
Who's that?
Rolling is the same as new style, rather than the original, albeit the control scheme's different. The CQC is similar to like before, with the face buttons being the prompts, unlike new style's trigger. The aiming system is just like before, and when you switch into first person it takes you straight down the sights. And this time when you lean left or right, you use the left stick. The controls don't take long to get used to, and honestly some people prefer this option. Everything's the same down to the last animation, including the overhead camera angles. And personally, I do prefer Legacy's cover rather than new style. It's a lot easier to press yourself against something. It just looks and feels better, especially when peeking out from cover. The control scheme isn't exactly like the PS2, but that's understandable, especially in the CQC department because of the pressure sensitive buttons being no longer a thing. One can quickly change their camos on the fly, so considering it's called Legacy, it still uses new style's features. But the great thing is that the Mark 22 has no bullet drop as before. Dropping and hanging retains the same buttons, plus there's no third person camera. But the cool thing is you can actually switch at any time in game between new style and Legacy, including the HUD menu's positions. The quality of life features is what makes Delta stand out here. Changing camo on the move, the easy access codec. But yeah, and you guessed it, most of the radio frequencies from the soldiers are still there. And when you get an injury, you can instantly access the cure menu. All of this is now on the D-pad, although whilst changing personalised camos and picking equipment requires going into the survival viewer. It's better than what we had originally because it keeps you in the game without a painstaking 2-second loading screen. The environments and the visual fidelity of Delta are truly stunning, and some of the best I've seen in gaming. This was a smart move by the devs at Team Virtuous, honouring what makes MGS so special to begin with, and an abundance of detail is thrown in. It's the way the environment complements its subjects within it. If the backdrops aren't mesmerising and familiar enough, what's taking place around you is breathtaking. It feels like a living, breathing world like before, but just in details that are way better in graphics and higher polygons can possibly showcase. From the grass swaying and moving whilst we hide within, to the fallen leaves from atop of the trees falling on the ground, or on Snake's uniform, to the muddy swamplands with all the dirt and mud that carries over to your outfit until you change that we can see in cutscenes. All inspired of course by the original, because you can still see mud go onto the outfit when you go into the swamp, but just not within cutscenes or in the survival viewer. Or slight rips and tears over time on your outfits. Truth be told, I think the damage system on the outfits is over exaggerated, because I put this outfit through the test and nothing's really done anything to it. The battle damage system showcases the wear and tear over time, and it's smartly implemented to add the level of detail. Everything is reflected in real time, from Snake's injuries and wounds, from bullet holes to cuts and bruises and burns, and eventually scars, with each playthrough telling a story dependent on you.
I'm the same way. Scars all over.
Can I see?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
Everything that struck us the first time in MGS3 with its environment has been retained and then some. From birds' feathers falling to the ground when they fly away, leeches attaching to Snake. To think we had those details in the PlayStation 2 version is just absolutely insane. I mean, albeit a lot better than I think the remake presented the leeches on Snake. Another welcome addition as well is the cure menu cutscenes when Snake gets injured. Yep, it's another detail that they haven't left out, which is nice to see, and there's several of them depending on what injuries you sustain. The level of detail in Delta's survival viewer is one striking aspect that expands upon the original. Depending on the environment is far more reflective than before, and it seems to show. Environmental features tend to stick around a lot more. There's even now an animal encyclopedia. Any animals you find along the way will be collected in a model viewer. The same details goes for the enemy variations, like the KGB, the Ocelot unit, flying units and the flame troops, dogs, motorcycle troops and GRU soldiers. The others look great as well, like the GRU officers, although their face models all look the same. I know the original did this with the occasionally different soldier model, but mostly they all look the same, which is a little bit lazy on the devs' part. I suppose you could get away with the mass soldiers considering their faces are covered up, but the attention to detail hits where it counts. Everything looks beautifully textured in Delta, including the reflections, which was something that the original did perfectly well back on PlayStation 2. Delta feels a lot more watered down in areas compared to the original, especially when it comes to certain details in different aspects of the environment. For example, footprints seem a lot more toned down than before. On the original, they are showcased far much better with way much detail. They have more visibility than Delta does. They just disappear within milliseconds, whereas the original retains the footprints, whether it's in water or mud, far better than Delta does. This is one particular detail that Metal Gear Solid is renowned for, and it started back within Metal Gear Solid 1.
Whose footprints are these?
Out of all the great details that Team Virtuous implemented, I'm surprised this is one thing that they oversaw, considering it's meant to be a fundamental element that makes the stealth mechanics far more immersive, especially those who are looking for a challenge to play on higher difficulties. This is one thing that Delta really gets wrong. However, in the battle with the End, you can see his footprints a lot more clearly than your own, but in the original it still far surpasses Delta. Whenever it's in the forest or the windy mountaintops, a top secret research facility or a warehouse, the cosy cabins barracks in the wood, the dark and wet caves, all the way to the impregnable fortress itself, all the areas feel just like before, but more vibrant and lush. And it's kind of what sparks off some of the emotions going back to these iconic locations with so much more detail. You find yourself just having to stop and look. The audio design that's tied in with Delta is some of the most incredible sound effects I think I've heard. Running waterfalls, as you probably already noticed, both of which have their own sound effects which make them stand out in their own way. Although I do like the originality of the caves, because you can really hear the wind creeping through all the crevices and cracks more than you can in Delta. I'll let you be the judge on who gets it right, but I think it's evident that you can't beat the original. The ambience is completely spot on. For the most part, Delta does a good job in reflecting its environmental sounds depending on what material it may be, like knocking an enemy out on grass or on hard concrete floors or metal. All combined together visually makes for an immersive living world. However, there is some areas that are very unpolished compared to the original, but I'll get to that. By far my favourite sound effects, aside from echoing voices,
it into any shape like clay. With just this much, you could blow up the Shagohod and the lab along with it.
Is that right?
Yeah, but there's a trick to using it.
Tell me about it.
and the gunshot sounds are incredible. I really recommend, if you haven't played Delta, that you invest in a 5.1 surround sound home theatre with a bass box. It was like Operation Snake Eater was happening in my room, and I couldn't imagine what the neighbours were thinking. Both visually and audibly, Delta fits the two cohesively, especially in the cutscenes. The new autosave feature is clearly a must nowadays, and if you're doing a rank run to unlock certain codenames, you can just simply reload your save instantly, without exiting all the way to the main menu. Plus there's tips and tricks for newcomers and plenty of ways to customise your playthrough in the settings. The feeling and atmosphere are big things in video games, and largely what modern day games lack is that character. Whilst Delta may be flawed, it honours the legacy in its own way. Sadly, Delta still has loading screens, something remakes usually abolish. Whilst Delta is beautifully presented in certain areas of the map, it lacks a lot of the original feel of the game. This isn't really every location, but some few I have noticed, like the forest where you face the end. In the original, it carried an eerie sense of dread, as if the forest was haunted. You could hear like strange noises that have been removed from Delta. So yeah, exactly. I mean, what's happened to that eerie atmosphere from the original? I mean, it's good, but its presentation is very generic. Plus there's just artifacts all over the floor, just still shows how buggy this game is considering some of the new updates. I mean, at a certain point there's like rainfall the original had as well, which is a cool touch to see that they added, but they didn't capture the feel of this location. Same as well goes for the swamplands. It's not as foggy and as mysterious as the original. In fact, it has so much visibility that it completely goes against what the original had. You could barely see what was happening over the pond. The other place is when we arrive at Groznygrad. The snow doesn't hit as hard as the original. And truth be told, I was hoping that Delta was going to capitalise on heightening the details. I was hoping they would add more snowfall to give off a Shadow Moses style vibe. To be honest, I can't criticise the map overall, because it retains everything that we love about it. The original had its own colours and textures, and it offered something special in its vibe. Something very familiar in Silent Hill 2, the original. When the remakes tried to add the filters, it still couldn't capture that dark and depressive essence. But for a modernised take, Delta does capture the essence, just albeit toned down. Delta also places weapons and items in the same locations as the original. Truth be told, as an old-timer, I didn't like that so much. I wish Konami would have done what they did with Silent Hill 2 Remake and changed the placement of the items and at least defied our expectations. Same goes for the placements of the Keratin frogs. So for the cinematics, this game, or rather the cutscenes, resemble the original. For the most part, the character models look great in my opinion. You can tell they've designed Snake to match his later character models from MGS5 and further on. He has this distinctive nose and masculine facial features. Some of the audience aren't pleased with characters like Ocelot and Eva, but these people often criticise everything. I mean, hell, if the pube isn't right on Snake's balls, they're going to complain about it. Because I think they look fine. I've used mods to make the faces resemble more or less like before, and truth be told, I preferred Delta's take. Although the Naked Snake model mod looked great as it resembled his original look, the only downside at times is that the lip syncing sometimes is like the voice doesn't match. But credit where it's due, it's not something that's game changing. The cutscenes felt like watching a movie, which of course helps with modern graphics. But with all the modernism, Delta hasn't removed the quirky Metal Gear logic from the scenes either. That combined with the audio, as mentioned earlier, make them a true joy to watch. However, there are some cutscenes that feel a bit watered down compared to the original, as you probably noticed. One of them being when Snake takes a beating from Volgin, it didn't look as brutal as the original. But with that being said, the torture room sequence more than made up for that. Plus there's new FMV cutscenes including for the Virtuous Mission and so forth, where we get cutscenes of Snake and the Major talking, also when Sokolov talks about the Shagohod, and we get the modernised model with that, with the filter hinting at a flashback, and we see this again also when Volgin talks about the legacy, and when Eva reflects on the mission. So it was reported a while ago that some of the voice actors were to return to smoothen up the voice lines in certain areas, since Konami have just relied on the previous voice lines in the original for Delta. There's probably far more than I've noticed, but there are some. For example, in the other versions of MGS with its tutorial sections would have different dialogue depending on the console and platform, or for the control scheme. Something similar happens in Delta, with Jim Paddock reprising his role, who plays as Zero. So anyway, Zero tells Naked Snake that his available weapons will be displayed in the window on the upper left. Since that the UI now has changed with Delta, that line of dialogue wouldn't make much sense, but it's unclear if Jim even voiced these new lines, as in a Reddit post, Delta has instead chosen to splice and remix several audio clips together, so that Zero now says your available weapons will be displayed in a list on the screen. It's noticeably chopped together and sounds really weird, which Metal Gear fans have instantly pointed out.
In the survival viewer, choose Weapon from the backpack. Your available weapons will be displayed in a window in the upper left. From that list, choose the weapon you want to equip and press the Enter button. For other equipped items, just do the same thing from Item.
Got it. Use the survival viewer backpack.
To equip a weapon, it's necessary to take it out of your backpack. In the survival viewer, choose Weapon from the backpack. Your available weapons will be displayed in a list on the screen. From that list, choose the weapon you want to equip and press the Enter button. For other equipped items, just do the same thing from Item.
Got it. Use the survival viewer backpack.
So as you saw in the comparison footage, the two are different. Understandably so, because they both had different control schemes. I'm not disputing that Jim Paddock didn't reprise some voice lines, although it will be hard to tell because they are just really doing the same voice. But as you saw, Delta seems a lot more chopped up within its dialogue than the original does. If that is the case, why not just have Jim Piddock redo the entire tutorial section? I'm not disputing he didn't come back, because after watching a video uploaded by Second Act with Jim Piddock in an interview, he did express that he was retaking some voice lines including the tutorials. However, he didn't get into specifics, most likely because of the NDA agreements.
Allowed to answer with this specifically. Can you give us a tease at all of what the recording entailed for this new Metal Gear Solid Delta? Were you redoing original dialogue? Can we expect anything new?
I've no idea. I'm sure I signed all sorts of NDA agreements. It was mostly alternate lines, some new lines, and redoing some lines. You know, they were slightly tweaked.
Do some new like game control tutorials, but I won't.
Yeah.
Next is when Snake is healing his wound after the boss throws him off the bridge. David Hayter has done some new grunts and sounds when in pain. And this also goes for in-game play as well, when he's also using CQC attacks or gets attacked. Also, the actor who plays the End has also done some new voice lines when you try to enter the Konami code to find his location, which in Delta doesn't work now. Instead, all we have is just new dialogue.
Play the game, Snake.
Sound effects are different as well, notably Volgin's electrical charge and when Snake geeks out over his pistol.
And the interlock with the frame is tightened for added precision. The sight system is original too. The thumb safety is extended to make it easier on the finger. A long type trigger with non-slip grooves. A ring hammer. The base of the trigger guard's been filed down for a higher grip.
Now, I'm not the Leonardo da Vinci of editing, and I've got a little bit of self-taught experience, but why do those sound effects sound like something you'd see on a YouTube video when it comes to title transitions? I get they were trying to highlight the comedic value of this scene, but it just felt cheap. The subtlety of the original just felt better. And what happened to Konami making their own unique sound effects?
The base of the trigger guard's been filed down for a higher grip. And not only that, nearly every part of this gun has been expertly crafted and customized.
Other effects also include the nuclear blast sound from the Davy Crockett. A lot of the visuals and sound effects are of course all subjective to each different viewer. But there's no doubt that sometimes Delta does it better than Areas than the original. Audibly, the original does it better, but visually, when it comes to the nuke, Delta gets it right. Or to the boss breaking Snake's arm, and as I've mentioned, the End's creepy sound effects.
Welcome back, boss. Welcome back, boss.
It's what makes Delta stand out as its own game, because everything has been overhauled in a sense with certain sound effects, with guns or grunts or even sometimes musical scores. There is still sound effects and musical scores from the original, but Delta does change it up. For example, at the end of the conversation with Granning, the music is way different. But once again, I prefer the originality. It adds to the intensity of the scene rather than what Delta gave us.
Why are you helping me?
Unlike Sokolov, the thought of defecting has never once crossed my mind. I love my country. I love this land. I cannot even imagine living anywhere else. I wish to remain a hero.
Why are you helping me?
Unlike Sokolov, the thought of defecting has never once crossed my mind. I love my country. I love this land. I cannot even imagine living anywhere else. I wish to remain a hero.
Some sounds echo as well on all the voices depending on the environment, which I mentioned in the latter. Overall, the motion capture still captures all the characters' quirks, so I can't fault the cutscenes whatsoever. Some other things did get my attention, like codec voice lines have changed too, and straight up censored you may say, from Sigint and Eva, and even Paramedic. I'll give you some examples. One of them is when talking to Eva about the calorie mate, the other one is after Snake's nightmare when Sigint talks about his personal one, but yeah, take a listen.
Are you on a diet?
What did you say?
Calorie mate is supposed to be really good for losing weight.
Are you saying I'm fat?
Are you on a diet?
What did you say?
Calorie mate provides a nutritionally balanced source of energy, and it makes counting calories easy.
Are you saying I'm overweight?
Whatever it hits, people, trees, buildings, turns into shit. Whatever it hits, people, trees, buildings, turns into crap.
And yeah, let's not forget about Paramedic as well, whose healing tutorial is different to match more universally to all platforms. This also includes Laurie Allen, who plays the boss, giving us new gameplay instruction lines, which, kindly she got back to me after I sent her a message to confirm this.
Camouflage is an indispensable tool when you're sneaking through the jungle. To use camouflage, first press the start button to go to the survival viewer. Camouflage is an indispensable tool when you're sneaking through the jungle. To use camouflage, first press the survival viewer button to go to the survival viewer.
First open the survival viewer with the start button. If you select Cure, you can start the treatment. Healing is divided into treatment using medicine with the item window button and surgical treatment using the weapon window button. First open the survival viewer with the survival viewer button. If you select Cure, you can start the treatment. Healing is divided into two types of treatment: medicine and surgical procedures.
And the Godzilla codec between Snake and Paramedic call is now different.
Well, if you wait 40 years, you might be able to see it in America, too.
Why's that?
2004 will be Godzilla's 50th birthday. And if you wait 40 years, you might be able to see it in America, too. It might even win awards all across the globe in 60 years.
Why's that?
2024 will be Godzilla's 70th birthday.
I have to admit, I love this change because Godzilla has gotten a lot more popular outside of Japan over the years. It's a nice little touch. Some of Sigit's and Eva's dialogue was slightly changed. I don't think it was necessary, but it's not a big deal. Although I will say this, it does go against Konami's statement of being completely faithful. However, someone did mention in the comment section that in Legacy, apparently all the old codecs from the original are still there. Somehow I don't believe this to be true. But it is clear to see that there's moments sometimes in the cutscenes and codecs where it appears Konami have made cuts in the audio and filled the gaps, as I mentioned earlier with Zero. We also see this when Volgin talks about the Philosopher's Legacy. Originally he says Australia, but the OG Japanese version is saying Austria as it's intended to be, even on Western versions, so they just fixed it, which is fine, but in doing so made it sound really awkward.
Switzerland, Australia, and Hong Kong. Switzerland, Australia, and Hong Kong.
It was great to have the cast back, but not like this. For Konami to go to all these lengths to remove two voice lines that are not really harmful is just completely moronic. Some people argue it's because they're trying to promote Calorie Mate, but that's bullshit because they promoted Calorie Mate before and they didn't use the word overweight back then, so it's clearly for a different reason. And that reason is quite telling, because what are they going to do when Metal Gear Solid 2 gets rebooted? Are they going to call Fat Man Overweight Man, just to appease to a special audience? Who knows, maybe they'll call Dead Cell Unalive Cell just to avoid any kind of censorship from these censor algorithms.
Right. You seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
It just feels cheap on the actors' parts to have them pulled in for something like this, as great as they are. In an article, David even said himself, yes, David Hayter, that he would have loved to have redone his lines because his voice acting skills have really matured since then. It's just a missed opportunity for pointless changes for something that could have been more creative and intuitive for the voice actors. Ultimately, the story is emotionally charged as it always was. However, I feel like it's hard to recapture the same emotion as the original did. It was a moment in time that defined an era that really made you feel a particular emotion. To describe it, it's almost like a new adaptation of a movie. For example, Batman. The new Joker movies were fantastic, but no one can deny the comic book-esque Joker and Batman were just far superior. There's just something special about originality that gets encapsulated throughout its time, whatever generation or period it came out. It's something special. For example, Cynthia Harrell is a great singer and vocalist, and her new take on Snake Eater was very mature and different. However, so many agree that it just doesn't feel the same as it did before. Delta, by all means, unlike some media, is a perfect example of replicating a piece of history. In doing so, captures a piece of its legacy and makes it its own, but it just still isn't quite the same. It's hard to carry over a legacy that already touched so many people. However, I will say, it is a great way to introduce new fans, and a way to spark up nostalgia for us old-timers. There are moments like me, I'm sure many of you felt nostalgic and hyped in certain moments. I mean, we already know what to expect, so maybe that's why it didn't hit as hard, at least for me. But when Delta delivers, it does it in a way that's completely unique to itself. It's like reliving the golden days, but with just a new layer. The codec feature sound effects are very innovative as well to match the time period of early radios, although I do prefer hearing the epic voice acting with more clarity. Plus, when skipping codec conversations or by mistake, it still plays at the same point you wish. That, with being able to pause cutscenes, makes the quality of life features arguably better than the original in that aspect. But with that being said, after experiencing Delta for a while, I was surprised to see what the heart and soul was, and it was still there, after testing all these unique features and details that were retained, albeit if they were unpolished. Delta is very special as far as it comes to remakes, because some tend to remove some beloved features. Metal Gear Solid Delta really doesn't remove anything at all, at least where it counts. So Snake vs Monkey has returned, and it's still as mad as it always was. With several stages and high scores to beat, the visuals look great, but all the best of it is the new animations when capturing the monkeys, which just look hilarious. It's always been a funny extra quirk that Delta manages to recapture, and then some. However, the rewards are a little disappointing compared to the original. Instead of the infamous monkey mask, you get 2 banana hats, one that's gold, and that's it. And you can unlock the banana costume by selecting I like playing Peace Walker. I mean, yeah, it doesn't really make sense considering, they could have used something out of Peace Walker instead. But basically this outfit makes anything you eat taste nice. But I imagine somebody will mod a texture of the Carrot and Frog or the Gakko mask in exchange for the monkey one. The masks though, they have a cool little detail and, well, you can press the left stick and toggle the mask on or off. And aside from Snake vs Monkey, if you have the Xbox, it's Snake vs Bomberman. And the rules are just as simple as they are as Snake vs Monkey. You throw bombs at the Bombermen and then you just capture them, I suppose. And at the end of the game you get like a little reward, a Bomberman cap both in the original style and in gold. Still find it a tad unusual how PC users didn't get the Xbox version considering it's Microsoft, but instead we got the PS5 version with Astrobot. Honestly, out this special feature for Xbox, I'm more interested in the dialogue, which is new added recorded voice lines from the voice actors who play both Otacon and Mei Ling make a return.
Snake, if you're listening to this message, it must mean that you've successfully infiltrated the location. As requested, I've prepared a little training exercise for you. Let's see. Your opponent for this exercise is, I got it written down here somewhere.
I've already taken care of it.
Mei Ling? What do you mean you've already taken care of it?
Just like it sounds. I've already arranged for a partner for Snake's special training exercise.
You what?
Then the menu has plenty of extras as well. The demo theatre is back so you can watch all the cutscenes. And also the secret theatre. All make a return with some new cool reels that you can capture of certain soldiers in game. And this is one detail I really liked because it was very creative. And you get all the original reels as well, although sadly they're not redone, but it's still cool to have them on play.
Boss! Hold your fire!
Come out, Jack.
You lost it!
It's over.
Snake! What happened? Snake! Snake!
So it's common knowledge that Metal Gear Solid Delta has changed the intro scene and Cynthia Harrell's reprised the role to sing again, I suppose. There's no doubt the new design looks really cool with the newspapers and the effects are definitely top of the range. And let's be fair, Cynthia Harrell's voice is still good. It's just the tone and the delivery that makes people prefer the original. Speaking of the original, if you're playing on a legacy playthrough, you'll actually get the original intro, which is really nice to see Konami have kept that in. And the same goes for when you make it to the main page. New Style has this different intro that's still as interactive as the first, where you can change the weather and filter effects, but if you're playing on a legacy playthrough you get the old school menu screen that we was used to in the original, where Snake is using CQC on a guard and you can change the colours and, some of the patterns. But Delta offers something interesting in New Style. Once you've completed the game, instead of having the original menu, it will switch to the area where you fought the boss. And the background music is switched to a more melancholic instrumental version of Snake Eater. Then there's the option where you can pick which MGS game in the series you like. Before it was just between 1, 2 and 3, but now we get 4, 5 and Peace Walker, which is really cool, but they don't really offer anything in terms of additional content that's really that noteworthy, aside from giving you uniforms. I was honestly hoping that Konami were going to do something super creative whilst picking an option like this. Because for example, if you pick I like playing MGS2, Snake will come down wearing the Reichov Raiden mask, which is just a really cool epic feature. It would have been nice to see them do something with each different game in the series, like perhaps if you played Peace Walker, like for example if you go into Granin's lab, instead of seeing Metal Gear Ray and Rex, maybe you see all the units that were in Peace Walker. Or how about some of the cool items in the game, like some of the cardboard boxes like the Love Pack. I'm sure there's something they could have done more with Peace Walker, but this includes other games in the series. Like in Metal Gear Solid 4, they could have had Snake come down wearing the militia outfit, and when he jumps down off the parachute he has a bad back, referencing Metal Gear Solid 4, and then as a reward at the end of the game, perhaps you could unlock Octo Camo. Or what about being able to change some of the characters' clothing? Something you can toggle on or off on cutscenes, like perhaps Eva could be dressed up like Meryl and Ocelot could be wearing his outfit in MGS4. It might sound ridiculous, but why not? Isn't that what a remake's for, to add something new? If I wanted to play the original, I'd just play the original. I think this one goes without saying, but I believe some people were hoping that MGS5 were going to bring some special details, considering that Skullface was a part of the Strike Force and cleanup team to help Big Boss after his mission was completed. Some were hoping like a cameo of him letting you out the jail cell when you can't get out after a certain time, or a secret ending at the completion of the game where Venom Snake awakes and it's all just one big simulation. Check out this video here if you want to see something like that. I try to recapture what could have been if Konami would have put this in as the ending. Okay, so I imagine you get the point, but there's several other details they could have added in from the other games, whether it's just specialised costumes for the particular games in the series, or secret endings or cutscenes, or even menu screens. I don't know, they could have done better with this one. So now we're at the part of the video where we're going to be talking about some of the juicy details that Metal Gear Solid Delta has retained, and some of the exploits and things that have changed. But one thing that is still in this game is the trank and roll, albeit just a little bit differently. You can still go behind an enemy and use the crosshair system, shoot them and roll into them, and it'll instantly knock them out like it did before. Throwing grenades in crocodiles' mouths is still a thing that was there before in the original, but this is something we saw at the Tokyo Game Show anyway. Another cool detail is throwing fish on land. You can see them flop around before they eventually turn into a ration. Got to love the detail. And shooting hovercraft searchlights will actually send the patrols back to base to get it fixed. And if you keep repeatedly shooting the engine, it'll set the soldiers on fire and eventually blow the hovercraft up.
We're being attacked. Enemy position unknown. Going into high alert. The searchlight broke. Going back for maintenance.
Return to your post upon completion. The good old Hornet's Nest trick is still there, and of course it would be because it's such an iconic moment that's pivotal to the game. And by far the best detail is near the bridge. When shooting the ropes not only makes the bridge unsteady, but can actually knock soldiers off into the river.
Come in, HQ.
This is HQ.
Patrol here. The enemy is attacking from an unknown position. Begin the alert status.
Of course, once you've shot all the ropes, it looks just unsteady as it always did before, but just in better detail. It's not the kind of bridge I would want to walk across anyway, but you can still also hang and hold your gun out at the same time. Next is sabotaging enemy supply sheds and ammo outlets. If you do this, it really affects the dynamic of the entire game. If you're in Bolshire Pass Base, for example, you can even blow up the helicopter, which later on into the mountains will replace the circulating helicopter in exchange for hovercrafts. And the brilliant thing is, after destroying multiple different ammo and munition sheds as well as food sheds all around the map, eventually has some surprising effects. And it shows within the dialogue. Guards get really hungry and they want to eat food. Normally when you chuck them food, they don't just tend to eat it outright. But they get that starving, they're literally willing to eat anything, including poison.
I'm famished. Huh? I found some food!
What's wrong?
And because if you destroy most of the food sheds, the guards' staminas also go down, meaning that they're easily knocked out. Plus there's also a cool feature after destroying most of the ammo munitions. When you're like under the alert and there's several reinforcements, after they've emptied their full clip, they throw their weapons on the floor, whereas as usually they just continue shooting you with the AK, having an endless supply of magazines. And there's also some funny, interesting dialogue where one of the guards finds food in the warehouse. But yeah, a really cool detail that Delta has not missed out at all.
I found some food!
So the next one is just as hilarious. If you're outside Granin's lab trying to get a way in, if you keep knocking on the door repeatedly, the guard just boots it straight open. The quick way into Granin's lab is still here as well. If you wear the scientist uniform, the guards will throw you into the cells.
You're not getting away. Get back to work.
Another great detail that's made its way into Delta is any scientists that have tried to escape Granin's lab have, well, hit a snag, should we say. One detail I definitely thought they'd leave out in Delta is that over time in the caves, Snake's eyes eventually adjust so that he can see walking around in the cave system. This is a really neat detail that they've retained, and this gives it bonus points. Oh yeah, and Eva's boobies have made a return.
The name's Eva.
Plus, investigating traps will pop up an exclamation mark above Snake's head. JOT still makes a return from Zone of the Enders, along with the Metal Gear Rex and Metal Gear Ray. 3D models look like they've been redone, including some of the paperwork around the schematics of these Metal Gears.
Missing link between infantry and artillery. A kind of Metal Gear, if you will.
The human shield function is just as before. If you hold up a scientist, the guards will still shoot you and the scientist just so they can get to you, I suppose. However, if you try do this with guards, they'll be a little bit more apprehensive before planning an attack to try take you out. But scientists, they just really don't care about them. And whilst using the sonar radar, will send the bats back to their original position. Or when you're up in the mountains, if you shoot the flamethrower guards at the right particular spot, they'll just spontaneously combust. Originally, I said I couldn't dump bodies into the swamp, and I ended up having to take down the video that I made because it turns out you can, albeit just a lot more painful and annoying than the original, because before in the original you could just drag the body and instantly drop them into the swamp, which counts as a no-kill. However, on Delta you kind of gotta mess around before you can put them in the swamp by using the first person function, but it does work. And you get the original magazines that were there before. They're very lowly textured as they were in the original, but depending on what region you're in, you can actually switch these magazines around to the Japanese and European versions. The version that you see at the moment was the PlayStation 2 in the USA. The Japanese magazine kind of switches it up, and instead of giving you like a Metal Gear magazine, it gives us Zone of the Enders, and if you shoot it a few times you can flick between the pages. There is like a Metal Gear Solid 3 article, and the more you shoot through the pages you can even see the 3DS version of Metal Gear Solid 3, including a Metal Gear Solid 2 magazine as well. They're not as well textured as the European version, but you can actually switch between which magazines you want to see in your playthrough by going into the settings. Another feature that's been retained is if you eat poisonous food and get food poisoning, or eat food that's gone off, which gives you stomach aches, you can actually get rid of these illnesses by puking twice rather than once. And you don't have to use any of your medical supplies in order to cure yourself. There's even a cool feature with the codex system that's been retained from the original. When you talk to whoever on the codex several times, you'll unlock new pages of specialised information about particular characters, and it looks like Konami have actually updated the pages so they look more textured and realistic to the character models.
Try to plant the C3 someplace out of the way where it won't be seen. If it looks like an enemy is about to find a charge, take him down immediately.
The next detail is if you throw poisonous food at a dog, it'll sniff it, but it won't eat it. However, if you throw it something tasty like a calorie mate, it'll gladly chomp away. The croc cap is in the same location, in the swamp, just above the crocodiles, where you have to hang from rope to rope until you can finally wear it. That combined with the crocodile costume from the Digital Deluxe Edition just makes you blend in better, I suppose. And you even get another croc cap as well that's missing an eye, but I assume that's with the Digital Deluxe Edition. Wearing it has the same quirks as before, where you can avoid enemy hovercrafts, as well as fool guards into thinking you're a crocodile.
Crocodile.
And GRU officers don't approve of you wearing a crop cap, and they take it off of your head. Dogs are also afraid of the crop cap and they won't attack you, however they will bark, which can cause an alert. And by far the best detail is when you're wearing the crop cap when facing the end. If you bide the rivers, he just thinks you're a crocodile, which is a great way to sneak past him unnoticed.
There, crocodile.
Next, if you shoot the hornet's nest, they respond exactly how they did before. If you equip the cigar after shooting down a nest, they instantly fly away. And if you shoot the hornet's nest wearing the black uniform, they attack you like crazy, eventually leading to death. However, if you switch to a lighter coloured costume like the scientist outfit or the tuxedo, they seem to just fly away. And yes, as it turns out, vultures do still feast on enemy corpses. It's a thing that I couldn't make happen straight away, but after a while it did, and I was impressed by what I saw. You can actually see the vultures picking bits of flesh off enemy bodies. If that ain't attention to detail, I really don't know what is. As we know, the original held so much incredible detail, and for a game back in 2004 was just something else. But Delta seems to add an extra layer in certain areas where it counts. Even removing the alert system as well is still retained in the game, albeit you have to call in caution mode, but it's still here. And a little icon pops up on the screen when you're configuring the codec.
This is Patrol. The area is clear. Recommend discontinuing the state of alert. Over.
Understood, Patrol. As per standard operating procedure, this frequency will no longer be used. Out.
This also includes fire support, which you can use earlier on in the game, but I dislike using it on the mountains. Because if you're lucky, sometimes you can hit the helicopter. Just be careful not to try and get hit by it yourself. Now I know this isn't a feature or a detail, but it's one part of Metal Gear Solid 3 that I really enjoy, was being able to blow down the helicopters. Aside from shooting them down with the RPG, you can also snipe the drivers. Next is taking out all the maintenance workers in the hangar. In doing so, lowers the Shagohod's health, so when you face it in the boss battle, it's a little less problem you have to worry about.
This is HQ. What's going on?
We're being attacked.
This is one that can be made difficult to happen, but Snake can catch a cold over time. I believe this was a feature that started in Metal Gear Solid 1, and Solid Snake usually contracts it after being in the holding cells, but also later in Metal Gear Solid 2 in the tanker, as well as Raiden in Arsenal Gear. And Snake's perception of food will change over time, as well as his stamina gauge. So if you eat something that gives you bad stamina gains, over time you'll notice that your stamina will increase better with terrible food.
Heck. This is horrible. I'm gonna puke. Gross.
And whilst holding up an enemy with no ammo, if you try to squeeze the trigger, the guard will look for that as an excuse to attack you.
No, wait. Huh? Who's that?
Plus, enemies have smart AI, and if they're injured, after time, they will slowly heal themselves. Albeit not in the best fashion, because apparently they can heal themselves with invisible bandages. It would have been nice to see Delta add this feature just to make it seem a little bit more immersive. Enemies' limbs act accordingly depending to how you shot them, and plus you can even disarm soldiers' weapons. And by the time you get to the mountain to meet Eva, if you haven't grabbed the night vision goggles by then, in a cutscene she'll give you some.
Better take these two. They should come in handy.
And then we come to Eva's fun and secrets, and this time round in the cure menu, the physics don't seem as advanced as they did on the PlayStation 2. Whilst moving Eva around, you can't see them titties bounce around like they used to do. So some of the weird and creepy voice lines are still there, which really makes you wonder what it's like to be in Kojima's mind. Someone made a comment that Eva doesn't say the same lines like she does in the original.
And then, when I was 17...
She does, but sometimes Delta is broken in certain aspects. When you try to interrogate particular characters, the audio sometimes cuts out. No wonder I myself and so many others thought the game was lacking content because of bugs. Honestly, nearly every little detail is still here. Even when you stare at Eva for too long, we'll creep her out, and she even comments about it.
What are you looking at? Keep your eyes to yourself. Don't look at me. Do you know what you're doing? Come on, get serious.
Yep, you guessed it, when you tranquilize Eva, she says some interesting dialogue, albeit a bit creepy. But not as creepy as getting on top of her while she says these things.
Yeah, right there. Oh, boss, that feels so good. Right there. No snake. That's so good.
I mean, come on, we've all done this, right? I mean, you have done this, right? The whole Eva section, escaping out of this area to get to the boss, is a lot better than what I remember from the original. Seems a little less annoying to babysit her this time around, but the guards seem awfully a lot more aware. But to be honest, it is just exactly like the original in many ways. You can still blow down the famous log, so they can't chase you from behind or kind of corner you from different angles. Everything down to the last detail, including the cutscenes. And depending how well you treat Eva, i.e. curing all her wounds and making sure that you fed her well, you get like a special cure menu sequence where you can see Eva in her bra and panties and so forth. And if you come back different times of the day, they actually switch positions and poses. But yeah, all the neat features have retained and stayed the same, and Delta does a good job in just trying to add the extra layer of detail. Although, as I've already expressed in the latter, in some areas it doesn't seem to capture that essence the original did. And all the posters make a return as well. So say for instance if you're playing in new style, all the same models that were in the original game reprise themselves in the posters, but a bit in a more mature fashion. A lot of them have aged since then, since it's been over 21 years, and have moved on with their lives and had families. But it's interesting to see how they've come back and, returned. However, if you play Legacy mode, all the original posters from the original game will return on the walls. And in the Granin's lab, some of the pictures or posters have been upgraded, completely, in different areas. I say upgraded, although some of the pictures look like something out of an AI generator, but yeah, I imagine you get the point. There's even pictures of Volgin's faction, and sometimes you'll see pictures of Metal Gear Ray posted around the entirety of Granin's lab, and of course other communist propaganda pictures here and there. And another cool detail is when shooting a soldier's exclamation mark or question mark above their heads stuns them rather than tranquilizing them. Another detail that was in the original, and I'm glad to see it back in Delta. It's just a little tiny mundane detail, but it works.
There's nothing.
So sometimes, as I said, Delta makes you think that some things are removed. Well, the first time I played the Reichov section, I was disappointed to say the least. But that's only because it happened to bug out during my playthrough. Like when I gave Rodden food, he would not make his way to the bathroom like he usually does. And when in alert mode and everyone's shooting at each other, he didn't even move. Or at one point he got stuck in by the door. But after rebooting the game, everything was fixed like before. Reichov would make his way to the bathroom, lock the door and let you in after you kept knocking.
Give me a break! Enough already! What, you want to join me?
Huh? I hear something.
You!
All of his quirks in the original are in Delta, including the voice lines that point to Raiden in MGS2 and his attack moveset, albeit broken in areas. But mostly everything that's important is included, such as Reichov not liking the model magazines you place down, or when you go outside, dogs can see through your disguise, probably through scent, alerting the guards. I also noticed as well, when you go through the secure doors to meet Sokolov, the guards salute you but no longer say sir. It's like Delta just removed all their manners.
Sir!
In Razvet, you can still terrorize Sokolov like you could on the original, by throwing in snakes through the window, shooting the windows out, or even actually throwing a grenade in there, which causes the mission to fail.
Get off me! Get off me!
And the same can be said about Ocelot as well, and if you drag him, a mousetrap still pops out of his inventory. Literally everything down to its last detail is retained.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
And the infamous ladder boss makes a return, which is approximately the same length as the Snake Eater song. The original is a lot more atmospheric in my opinion, with the windy sounds channeling through the tunnel, and as well as Cynthia Harrell's original vocals, just seems to make it a lot better.
But you're so supreme. I give my life, not for honor, but for you.
However, I do like Delta's take in climbing up through the tunnel. The details look a lot more realistic, and there's just a lot more added structures such as the pipes and tube work, as well as some of the wiring for the electricity that looks like a snake slithering its way up the tunnel. The atmosphere might not be as striking as the original in terms of the wind, but everything else works for it just fine. Visually, it looks stunning. So the jail cell in Grozny Grad is just like before, albeit the lighting is very different from the original. It's a lot more darker and glum and depressing. The fork is still effective, and deadly by the way if you know how to use it, which is still useful to eat that little rat that's running around the cell compared to the trash that Johnny gives you. I think one of the best things we did in our spare time when we didn't know a way out of the cells was just toy around with a gun that the boss gave us.
Hey! What's going on here?
The sound effects in the revolver are great, but however the animations are lacking. Compared to the original, Snake really spins the shit out of the revolver. This time round it's almost like he's shy and wants to pop it straight back in his holster. Seeing Guy Savage return was a definite must. This is something that they failed to capture in the HD collection and the Master collection. And well, you might ask, what's better about it this time than before? This time it's got cutscenes, and it's nice to see that Konami have put a lot more effort in by rebuilding off the first one. And if the game feels very familiar, that's because Platinum Games helped develop it, just as they did with Metal Gear Rising. All while still keeping the originality and the concepts of the playstyle of the original Guy Savage. It's a lot better than the first one because you get more time in combat, and it aligns with Snake's Nightmare because Dracula does make an appearance. All the interesting secret R1 scenes are still there, including the code to escape the prison for those who didn't notice. If you didn't catch the code whilst meeting Sokolov, you get to capture it again when you're in the torture room with the Sorrow behind the boss with a clipboard. Literally everything that was in the original game is still here, like hiding under the bed, and Johnny will eventually look underneath to see what you're doing.
What's going on here?
And yep, you guessed it, if you get on Johnny's good side after giving him a load of his own food back to him, then he starts opening up and he gives you some interesting information about his family of Johnnies.
My name is Johnny too. All the firstborn sons in my family are called Johnny. My dad's a Johnny, and my son's son will probably be a Johnny too.
And isn't this why we love Metal Gear Solid so much beyond its quirks? Behind the back of his family photograph is the code just to be sure, in case you forgot for the second time, that there's a way out of the cell. And if it couldn't get any more detailed, if you found the sig spray along the way, Johnny will give you them back to use, which is pretty useful to escape the cell, especially if he gets close by.
It's the least I can do.
And yep, you guessed it, you still can't ask him for a free pass to get out of the cell.
Well,
Don't suppose you could let me out of here?
huh? I can't do that.
So in the cells, if you go into the cure menu, you probably know you'll have a fake death pill on you, which is also used to escape the cell because it fools Johnny into thinking you're dead. But also you have something called the transmitter inside of you, and this part is very crucial for one of the biggest cutscenes to play in the game, behind the waterfall with Eva, where it gets a little bit raunchy. But also, if you decided to keep it in, by the time you get to the waterfall, the Ocelot unit will be there to try and find you. But if you remove this in the cell, they won't be there, and you can get into the waterfall quite clearly. But if you do keep the transmitter in, which I recommend because you get the epic cutscene, but you also see Eva coming through the waterfall taking out the Ocelot unit if you didn't do so prior. Honestly, I was just so happy to have the wrestling transmitter scene back, which probably took a big shit over the modern audience's expectations considering everything's absolutely offensive, but it's nice to see Snake get a piece of ass in a 4K resolution.
Is that how they do it in the KGB?
Sometimes. Would you rather I did it American style?
But how'd you know there was a transmitter lodged there? That's some female intuition you've got.
So now we're reaching the finality of the video, and I've saved one of the most interesting aspects of Delta to the very end. This is regarding some of the bosses and how over time they have changed. Even some of the attack patterns and some of the movements of the characters are a lot different compared to the original. That goes for exploits and everything else that we're used to before, where we could completely destroy bosses by using these exploits. However, Delta completely eradicates everything that we was expecting from the original, and honestly this is where Delta gets it right, by making these boss battles far more intriguing and interesting whilst keeping their originality. In an essence, it makes the difficulty of facing them way much better, and this is something that I expressed earlier on in regards to Delta, and thankfully Konami have come through with one of the most important elements I'm glad they fixed, because after all we're facing the Cobra unit. It's nice to go back to the original to use these exploits, but I think this is what makes Delta stand out and be unique. So the stun lock function has been completely eradicated. Usually Ocelot would make his way behind the back of the tree, but this time instead he goes behind the rock instantly. In the original you could shoot him with the Mark 22 and throw stun grenades at him and keep him locked in one place of the map until his health or stamina would run completely out. It's like stun grenades have been completely overhauled as well, because they seem to have more of an effect once they go off compared to the original. However, Delta offers so much more. Ocelot's attacks seem to be a lot more vicious, and you can even shoot the hat off his head just like before. The roll function is a neat thing in Delta as well, especially when fighting Ocelot, because it allows you to dodge his bullets more carefully. The placements of the poisonous snakes are still on the ground, so you've of course got to be careful where you move, and this annoying little unit at the back still keep laughing at you while shooting you occasionally when you're kicking Ocelot's backside. And as it turns out, in response to that, they're still invincible, so trying to shoot them doesn't do anything. And the quick draw duel has returned. If you stand in the centre of the map with your gun out, Ocelot will offer you, let's just say, an unfair duel. got to love the bullet drop. If you shoot the goat at the back as well, it also distracts Ocelot, giving you a chance to get the attack in. But you mostly want to be doing that whilst he's out in the open. The longer that you stay into the fight, Ocelot's reloading skills get far much quicker. Which makes a lot of sense because he's getting better over time in the course of the fight. After all, reloading is a revolution.
Looks like this. It's a revolution.
And yes, the Ocelot units still get their kicks out of mocking you, they just don't understand the brilliance of the croc cap. But let's just say throughout most of the fight, you shoot down the majority of the Hornet's Nest. Ocelot will get a little bit of payback on his own, and if you're stood near the Hornet's Nest, which usually appears in a harder difficulty, he'll shoot it down and yeah, it stings. The Pain is a lot more ruthless. Maybe he always was, but to me in the remake he seems a lot more relentless with his attacks. And it also appears as well that Konami's added a new variation attack. For example, instead of sending one grenade over to your platform, there's one where he sends over 3 grenades. Fighting him on lower difficulties is a lot easier than doing it on extreme, because he switches between his attacks very quickly. Whether that's sending over his pheromone grenades, or pulling out his Tommy gun, or throwing grenades your way, or the infamous bullet bee attack, which is usually easily avoided when you dive under the water. Another interesting detail I've noticed that Konami added, especially on the harder difficulties, is that other grenades, unlike the original that would instantly blow off the Pain's Hornets, but now it takes more than 1 grenade to get rid. However, if you use a smoke grenade, it only takes 1. There was never really any exploits you could use against the Pain, aside from just being really accurate landing the headshots. Of course, you can still use the M37 shotgun to rid his Hornets, as well as using the underrated torch that also gets rid of his pheromone bees. And as well, if you throw a Hornet's Nest ration either on your island or his, it'll attract his bees from attacking you and actually give you a better ration that gives you more stamina. The next one is the Fear, and out of all the bosses I've faced in Delta, I don't know if you guys feel the same, the Fear was actually the most buggiest out of every single boss. There's been times where he jumps trees really slowly, or when he climbs the animations look really off. By far the worst experience I've had whilst trying to face the Fear is whilst trying to shoot him, he was just invincible, and then he got stuck on a tree and couldn't move. But with all the bugs aside and reloading the game several times, it's actually kind of a cool boss to face, and even the Fear himself has some new attack animations. One being where he fires a load of bolts into the sky and they come raining down. If you were to fight the Fear as, well, intended, normally you'd just try to take his stamina down, use the thermal goggles, and when his stamina runs low, kill all the poison frogs on the ground so he eats them so you can just completely abolish his stamina. But if you're a Metal Gear Solid connoisseur, just as I, then I know for a fact that you try to use the exploits. And one of them is when you take the fake death pill and when the Fear turns his back, you pop the stun grenade and shoot him with the AK, it completely deletes his stamina. But this time round, that's not even possible. Same goes for the trap trick as well, where you do the same as before. You go underneath the trap wire, take the fake death pill, wait for the Fear to turn his back, wake up, pop the smoke, and then trip the trap, and then it should hit the Fear, deleting his stamina. You can't even do this neither. It's a sneaky little move by Konami, but honestly it's the best thing they could have done, because I think this is how they intentionally wanted you to fight the Fear, and it actually makes a lot more sense, because yeah, these exploits made them far too easy to beat. And the last exploit as far as I know is if you stand behind the Fear after taking the fake death pill with the torch, and stay behind him, it would set him on fire. In the original he wouldn't move and he would just stay there until you eliminated his health, but this time he's a lot more aware when he's on fire. So every single unique function about the end has returned on Delta. I mean, of course it has. I mean, you can still shoot the end in the wheelchair taking him out earlier, and then when you go into the forest you'll face the Ocelot unit instead. And all the original cutscenes have returned as well, including when the End dies of old age or when Snake falls asleep. A lot of these cutscenes are still triggered by the passage of time just by changing your clock. There isn't really much to say in terms of the fight. It was as great as it always has been, and Delta has still brought that attention to detail back. However, I will say, compared to other bosses, it lacks any more detail that makes the End far more challenging. He's just too easy to beat, even on extreme mode. After you've shot him, you can just still chase him into different sniping points like it's nothing. And you can't use the stun grenade exploit anymore, where you could run behind him and it would cancel your footsteps. And that goes for as well using the Sig Spray exploit, where you can just trap him in one place with stun grenades and keep spraying him with these Sig Sprays. That's no longer a thing. But most of the other cool details, like him photosynthesizing after his stamina's been low for so long, or even using his own parrot against him to act as a scout to find him, because you can't no longer use the Konami code anymore to find him on the map. And now we come to the Fury, who incinerates nearly everything on sight. And it's fair to say Delta does a decent job in recapturing this boss fight, although I will say the original felt far more difficult. Flames this time round don't seem to have the same effect, let alone the same serious damage as they used to have before. When the Fury used to get pissed because, you know, he gets angry easily, he used to set this place on fire crazily, especially at the very end of the fight. But this time round he seems a little bit more tame compared to before. It's weird how roles have changed, because if you ask me, I think the Pain is probably the hardest boss now, whereas before it used to be the Fury. The dive button makes it far too easy to dodge his flames, you can still use the cardboard box to put out the fire, and as you can see in most of these different lanes, the fire doesn't usually stay as long as it used to before. At least that's how it feels to me. But some of the cool details surrounding the Fury have retained, like wearing the NVGs while playing the cutscene, or whilst wielding the torch, Snake will eventually throw it away and bring out his knife. And if you get set on fire, you can shoot the water pipes from above that'll eventually run out. So now we come to the Volgin boss battle, and you can still wear the Reichov mask, which sends him into some mad confusion before drop kicking you half to death.
It really
And the tree frogs are still as effective as they always were. You throw one on the floor and, well, Volgin loses his mind. And probably one of the best details I like about this boss battle the most is if you've been collecting glowing mushrooms, it's a great way to stop him from using his electrical attacks that go directly towards the ration, then you. But also it has to be the new CQC animations that just look absolutely amazing compared to the original, where you can just slam him usually in a few directions, but not with such finesse like this. It's honestly one of the best things I think I've seen Delta use that kind of sets it apart from the original and makes the boss fight a lot more unique. However, as I explained in the latter, the controls just feel a little bit unresponsive and clunky at times. Without the CQC prompt appearing on the screen, you can't just use it as and when you choose. Plus, you can still shoot the water pipes from above, and the effects look way better than they did on the original. You can literally see the water streaming down off of the outfits. It looks really impressive. Plus, it's a good way to get rid of Volgin's electrical charge as was originally intended, and it still works just as good. Honestly, there's not a single thing that you can fault with this boss fight. If anything, it adds something new, it adds an extra layer of detail, and on top of that as well, it even adds all the attacks that he originally had before, and then some. So yeah, did you guys not know any problems within this scene that I've just shown you so far? I mean, what is going on with this here? Whilst the section's playing like a movie/gameplay sequence, as you can see, it just completely bugs out. I imagine this is probably being patched now, but at the time of recording this, I was a little bit annoyed because I really wanted to see the cool cinematic effects that we so loved to see from the original when Volgin is piloting the Shagohod. But aside from all the bugginess about the game, everything is exactly the same. The placements of the soldiers as when you're leaving the facility is just exactly the same. In most of my playthrough, I didn't really experience much stuttering at all. In fact, I had quite a decent FPS count, all considering the occasional bug. It was annoying considering I could have just boot up the original and I wouldn't experience any of these issues, but considering all of its flaws, it really hits where it counts. And with the new crosshair system as well, really makes playing this bike section a lot easier than it was before because you don't have to go into first person. So the gameplay with the bike chase sequence mixed in with the cutscenes, it was absolutely incredible to say the least. The weapons work really great, everything functions just as it should, and there's no better way to actually stick it to the Shagohod than blasting it with rockets several times and unequipping it and re-equipping it just as we did before. Delta still has the heart and soul of the original in many ways. The details are just undeniable, and honestly, this was the biggest thing that I was looking for whilst playing this game. Aside from everything else we knew was going to be retained, such as the cutscenes and so forth, but Konami really made sure it hit where it counted. The only problem that I could criticise with this game thus far is just some of the controls and the functionality, and just some of the occasional bugs and stuttering. So other than that, it really does have everything else going for it. So for those who haven't even played it yet, then well, maybe it's time to try it, especially now considering that there's been a lot of patches since then that have fixed all the problems. So yeah, I almost honestly forgot the Sorrow was a boss battle and actually almost left him out this video, hence why the placement seems a little bit off. But in terms of what the game looks like visually in this segment, is absolutely stunning. However, the one thing I don't like about this is the entire gameplay sequence. It's nothing like the original whatsoever, and in doing so, in trying to be different, it just doesn't work. The original just presented it far much better, both visually and audibly. But hold on, even though things are different, the details are all still the same, and that's ultimately all that really matters. Its presentation isn't bad by any means, I just think the way it's delivered visually is just not as powerful as the original. You could say it's the textures, the colours, the lighting, whatever it may be. Just even something as simple as when the Sorrow sends away a memory blast your way just doesn't look as distinctive as the original. Delta hasn't lost any character by any means, in fact it has its own new take on it, and at times it can be quite appealing, especially the lightning effects, and everything else, like the spirits look completely different as before. But I just prefer the originality, there's something far more spookier and scarier in delivery. But aside from my personal opinion, which I mean, who cares, the details that are mostly from the original are still all here. I mean everything, down to every single enemy you've pretty much taken out in any specific way. One thing I shall add as well is whilst walking through these crowds of souls that have been misfortunately taken out, it seems a lot harder than before in the original to make it to the very end of the map with the Sorrow. because there are just swarms of them, and I've actually died once before, which is ironic because you're already dead. One feature that is very slept on that a lot of these newcomers don't really know about is when you take pictures of the bosses you've taken out and their corpses. If you look in your gallery, you should be able to see pictures of all the developers who made the game at Kojima Productions. And the final battle with the Shagohod is just as incredible as it always was in the original. You have to shoot the treads out in order to get to the very back of the Shagohod to destroy the damaged component at the back. And it's still impressive to witness again nearly 21 years later in these kinds of visuals. This game really is a nostalgia trip in every other way. I might not have been hyped initially when I first started to play it, but after a while it started to re-jog some feelings. And I kind of felt like that young person who was sat there before playing in front of a box TV before HD TVs were even a thing. Getting off the bike as well in the second stage is just as exhilarating. All the placements as well I noticed, such as the turret guns, are still placed in the exact same locations. I mean, I did experience a little bit of lagging and stuttering at this point at the time I made this recording, which was really annoying and kind of dampened the experience a little bit, but it still brought back a lot of great memories. One thing I've also noticed as well is, like, unlike before where you could use the SVD to completely destroy Volgin, usually in 2 hits, this time it takes way more shots to take him out. So it seems like Konami has been aware of all the exploits that the fans were using and completely patched them, which I'm glad they have, because now it makes the boss battles far much more intense. Yeah, thanks for that, Eva. Way to ruin the showcase. Honestly, everything just feels so beautifully put together, even from the way the effects change. Just as you know it's becoming to be at the end of the boss battle, this is very pivotal as we know what happens next. But interestingly, Konami have added a new detail within this cutscene that points back to MGS5. And I absolutely love how they've added this detail in, because honestly it's the only thing that really points to any other game in the series aside from Metal Gear Solid 2, and it's a nice little throwback. I mean, one of the sound effects you hear in the cutscenes is directly straight from MGS5 when the man on fire arrives. So yeah, they've really captured the appearance out of MGS5 in terms of Volgin's appearance, or the man on fire if you will, down to every last detail including all the bullet shrapnel stuck in his head. Looking back now over 10 years at the Phantom Pain really just makes you realise how many clues and secrets there were to show we were never playing as the real big boss.
And this man on fire who's been coming after us ever since you woke up? Well, that just might be what's left of our old friend Volgin. It's not over yet. Back in '64, in Seleniuarsk, you brought his plans for a utopia down in flames. That grudge is what's keeping him alive.
So we now come to the most important part of the game, and boy have Delta really mixed things up. The boss still charges you like she always did originally, but the CQC is a lot different than before. The only way that you can counter the boss's CQC is by waiting for it to go into what I call slow-mo or reflex mode. That then is the cue for you to be able to, counter her attacks. Konami have no doubt captured the presence of this area, from the stars of Bethlehem to the pedals floating away, from the gentle gust of winds in the background to hearing the boss's footsteps in the grass. Konami really realised they had to capture this moment perfectly, and it's fair to say that they've done just that. You still feel every single emotion that only the original seemed to capture, but Delta brings it back in a way that makes the gameplay arguably better. Because now with CQC, aside from standard takedowns, there's completely brand new animations, and at the second stage of the fight when the boss's health is quite low, you can't just rely on one counter. Instead, this time there's several counters in order for you to be able to take the boss down. And this goes especially if you've got a weapon in your hand, which makes CQC counters way more difficult. You can also use stealth attacks on the boss. I mean, you could do before, but this time it makes it a little bit more easier. Because on the original, you could still take the boss out with CQC if she wasn't aware of you was quick enough behind a tree, but in Delta really allows you to take the advantage when she isn't looking. Plus, you can collect all the snakes that are by the logs, which is a callback to every other snake really in the series, like Solidus and Solid Snake and Liquid Snake. And another cool improvement they've added in this boss battle is when you're equipping any weapon, the boss will completely dismantle it.
Is that all you've got?
In the original, she'd do the same with assault rifles and anything else, but when it came to the Mark 22, she wouldn't dismantle it. The effects are still there when you see the weapon items show up on the screen. However, Delta now has added animations where you can personally see the boss dismantle your weapons. But yeah, every detail and secret's there. Even when you take the fake death pill, the boss sees through the deception.
Get up and fight.
For me, out of all the boss fights, is definitely the best one, not just for what it means in the story and for the characters, but just gameplay overall, and honestly, it does do it better than the original, there's no doubt, because it offers so much more, and honestly, as an emotional farewell goes between two legendary bosses in a CQC duel to the end, the apprentice versus the mentor, and the apprentice getting the better of the mentor, it just seems so much better now. When it comes to a top list of beautiful finality in video games, it seems criminal not to put Metal Gear Solid at least in that list. Then to add to the emotional impact after defeating the boss, your beloved mentor who's pretty much saved the world, you and Ocelot reunite in this epic CQC showdown, and honestly, it just looks impressive. How can it not? The visuals look great. But it's awesome to just be reminded of what made this game so brilliant to begin with. How Big Boss's and Ocelot's relationship span from this point in history. The mutual camaraderie between the two and the ultimate respect they share is undying. Albeit if their way of trying to show respect is killing each other, but that's typical Big Boss and Ocelot. And it's from the rest of the series we see the established relationship between the two. And Ocelot serving as the last link to the boss, being her son, just seems all so poetic knowing that he had a hand in shutting down the system by playing the long game against a patriot. But with my rant and my adoring love for this game over, it was great to see the duel sequence make a return just as it was before, and depending on which revolver you pick has a different outcome. Got to love it.
It's a blank! Oh, that was fun. Till we meet again, John.
We'll meet again.
Right.
Metal Gear Solid Delta, in many ways, is a triumph. Coming back to such an iconic game, my personal favourite and entry in the series, stirs something emotional. This is where the timeline truly begins, where the story of these legendary characters unfold and is first expanded into something larger than life. Delta captures that essence, but not without flaws. The controls can feel stiff and unresponsive, the game stumbles with bugs and lag, and yes, before you're asking, I'm not running on a low-end PC, I'm running on quite high-end. And Konami's decision to play it safe, in my opinion, limited the creative potential that a remake of this calibre deserved. Still, Delta faithfully delivers the essentials of Snake Eater. It preserves what mattered most, and in doing so reminds us why this game has lasted in our collective memories for over 21 years. Visually and audibly, Delta is unique in its own right, yet it lacks the art style and atmosphere the original captured so effortlessly. That's why it feels like an end of an era, and the start of something both familiar and new. The best may not be ahead, because the originals offered everything these remakes can only hope to replicate. But Delta still opens the door for the future. Selling over 1 million copies on day one, it's clear that there's a hunger for more Metal Gear. It's unclear whether that will be Peace Walker or whatever else. It's unlikely the MSX games will be into the mix, considering that those games would have to be remade from the ground up. Of course, it all remains unknown. But what's certain is that Snake's story in Metal Gear's legacy is alive again. So, I want to hear from you. Did Delta leave its mark on you, or did it fall short of what you hoped? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the notification bell, because sometimes YouTube doesn't report to you guys that I've made a new video. So with all that being said, I just want to thank you guys for watching, and until we meet again.